Hi team, welcome to the Kindness, Curiosity and Comfortable Shoes podcast. My name is James McFetrich and this is an ongoing toolkit for all healthcare staff. Whether you are a porter or a paediatrician, a domestic or a driver, clinical or non-clinical, just starting or just finishing your work in healthcare, this podcast aims to give you some useful thoughts about working for this amazing business to get you through your day. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you're finding that these thoughts in the podcast are useful and fulfilling the promise of being a toolkit for healthcare workers. I really want to make sure that these podcasts are accessible to all, and there are obviously costs to setting up and running them. So if you feel these podcasts have helped you, please help me to help others. You can support me by going to buymeacoffee.com/jmaceducation. That's buymeacoffee, all one word, .com/jmaceducation, and support me there. Or if you're listening through the podcast website at kccpodcast.buzzsprout.com, click on the heart at the top right to support the show up there. And if you can help me, then I can make this more accessible. And the thing I really want to do next is get a transcription service available for each of the episodes for those people who want to get involved, but they cannot listen to podcasts. Thank you so much for your help. Hello, today I was going to cover education, and apologies for those of you who were waiting for this week's episode. It's a bit late for a reason I'll come on to in a bit. Education I'm very passionate about. That's one of the reasons why I do the podcast, and it's the main role that I have in my career at the moment. What always strikes me is how some people feel there is this differentiation as to whether they are an educator or not. And personally, I think it's really important that we accept that we're all educators, even though we may not feel like it. Whatever grade, level, experience you have, there's always someone just slightly behind you who you will be passing on your knowledge to, whatever role that you have. And obviously, we've all been educated in some form to get to our current positions. Some of the difficulties with education is understanding what we actually mean by it. And I came across a definition which certainly got me thinking, that education is defined as the process of receiving or giving instruction or an enlightening experience. So that first half, the receiving or giving instruction, I feel goes against what most good educators would want. The active act of giving instruction compared to the passive act of receiving education just doesn't sit comfortably with me. But I do love that second half of the definition, the enlightening experience, which is exactly what I feel we should strive for as educators. So education at its worst is just a passive experience and unenlightening, but at its best, education is lighting a fire, getting that passion and progression and helping people to enhance change in their career. Certainly, if you're only receiving education without being actively involved, you're unlikely to be engaged and far less likely to understand and remember what has been going on in that educational experience. I've thought a lot about this over the past few months, and I think there are key elements to education that are probably really important to keep in mind for anyone who is giving any education to anyone else. And I think that is that engagement, understanding, and remembering. In the basis of, if you're giving, delivering, facilitating education, whatever the correct word is, can you convince yourself that whatever you are delivering in whichever form, in whatever setting, to whichever group, are you truly engaging your audience? Are you helping them to understand a concept? And if necessary, are you helping them to remember that concept? And it's something I come back to when I'm planning my sessions, that engagement, understanding, and remembering, quite nice things to come back to. I said I'd explain why this episode's a bit late. So earlier on this week, I went to the DMEC conference in Manchester. That's Developing Excellence in Medical Education conference. So really nice conference, lots of inspiring talks, lots of nice chats with people, all focusing on how we can be better medical educators. And I thought this would tie nicely with the podcast themes, and I was wanting to do one on education anyway. And so the next section of the podcast, just covering some of my thoughts, especially like always when you sort of reflect coming back from these things. I was on the train and just jotting down a few things that made me think. So it was quite a busy conference, lots of speakers, lots of sessions, lots of people that I spoke to. In an ideal world, I'd love to be able to attribute my thoughts and the things that inspired me to specific people. But these were the thoughts that came to me on the train, just looking through information that was on social media and thinking back on the sessions. So I'm sorry I can't attribute some of these things directly to people, but certainly thank you to the organisers and all the speakers for helping inspire these thoughts. One thought that I've heard this previously before is that good education in clinical practice will save more lives than we can do on our own as a clinician. And that's a really nice thought, isn't it? Especially if you're at a stage where you feel you are doing less clinical work or worried about the clinical work that you do, that education, we can really inspire people coming behind us. We can help them be better clinicians, and that will help them save more lives. And it's really exponential, the impact that we can have on future patients. And that role in education is quite an important thing to think about, and understanding that life is tough. And this was a theme in a number of different sessions that I went to. Life is tough anyway, certainly tough financially at the moment in the UK and in the rest of the world, and certainly tough clinically at present as we head into what I'm sure is going to be another difficult winter. And so our role in education should be very much to try and energize and inspire people. And that is a nice positive way of helping people through difficult times. But because of those difficult times, I think we do forget sometimes that we are human, and we are also teaching humans too. We've probably all sat in sessions where everyone has been teaching by the book. There's no proper engagement, like I was saying earlier. There's no understanding that we may have stresses or concerns too. And there was one talk about burnout, which I really liked, and thinking about actually we can help decrease burnout in other people if we are providing support as supervisors. And that support isn't just with meetings, but providing good role modelling. And a lovely quote, again from a different talk, from some research about rural medicine, I think it was, a doctor saying that they had heard a patient tell them that they were a better doctor when they had a student. Oh, what a lovely thought, that sometimes we feel that having students or trainees with us can slow processes down, but hearing that from a patient, that you could be a better doctor when you are training and educating. And following on that theme, it's one thing that I kept coming back to is that we do, as educators, we do really care deeply about who we are developing, but therefore it's really obvious when we perhaps are caring less and investing less time. And there are a couple of sessions talking about differential attainment and people who are perhaps taking different career paths, from different cultural backgrounds, and how they can very easily certainly feel or actually be sidelined because of those differences. And simple things to just remember that humanity, that names are important. How ridiculous is this that we need to remind ourselves how important calling each other by names, so important to developing that relationship in getting to know someone. And a really sad fact that people with unusual names for the setting that they are now in, if you had an unusual name, that would actually decrease your learning opportunities purely by the virtue of having a name that isn't as common as perhaps other names in the same group of people. And a lovely analogy related to that was that if people do have different career structures, different types of training, perhaps they've come from overseas, perhaps they've come from different medical schools, that they still have that competence because they have to get to that stage in their career, and they can do the work. But, and this is a quote that I loved, they can feel like a fish in water, but you feel the weight of the water more than other fish. You can do the job, but it's just harder to do it. And trying to sum all this up, I think the main thing that I would take away, and again, it's sad that we have to remind ourselves to do this, but that prompt in education, firstly, we perhaps need to be compassionate and empathetic and provide that support for people that we are educating and training, and remember that they are real people, because once we can acknowledge that and help support that, almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, once we can do that, then we can engage people better in education, and therefore they can grow and flourish far more than if we just go straight in with, these are the facts you need to know for this session, or this is my role as a supervisor, and we're going to manage A, B, C. We need to have that engagement and understanding of who we are as people to get over that toughness, to get over some of those difficulties that we know are there, and we can then move forward and provide some really good education once we've got that engagement, and really help people understand concepts or themes of how they work in a new situation, and crucially how they can remember that to be able to move on to further aspects of their training. There's so much more that I could talk about education, but that's probably enough for today. I hope it's interesting, and as always, especially if you're at the conference and if there are any other themes that you want to develop from what I've talked about, please do feel free to contact me. Thank you for listening today. Let me know what you thought about this episode. I am on @JMacEducation on all the socials. And there are links in the show notes for anything that we've talked about today that may be of interest or further reading for you. I'd be really grateful if you could rate, review and subscribe. And most importantly, if you found this helpful, please tell your colleagues about this podcast. So please take care of yourselves out there. You are doing a great job. And remember, be kind, be curious, and don't forget your comfortable shoes. Thank you to Shakina Studio for the music, downloaded through Audio Jungle. Thank you to Beth for the artwork and the photo, produced through Canva. And thank you to Buzzsprout for hosting the podcast. The Kindness, Curiosity and Comfortable Shoes podcast is a JMac Education production.